Hello. Thanks for tuning in. I'm a book writer and I've written about 5 or 6 books and I'm starting to publish them. Many of these books were written about 12 to 15 years ago and they still have relevance in the new discoveries and 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 they do hold water. They the big thing is the Big Bang Theory. I just wrote a book, Motion. Look at where we came from. Big Bang, Big Lie. That's all in the title. Um, it it's a book that I just wrote part one, and I had a couple of people look at it, and I had one of my friends, Carl, look at the book and critique it, and boy, he was brutal. He wrote about 3 or 4 emails, and these weren't regular emails. These were 1 and 2 pages with questions. He does have the experience of reading over 600 books, and he was confused on how I could just write a philosophy book, a thesis book on something that he thought as stable as the Big Bang. Little did I know he was not privy to what the Big Bang was. And many people might not. The Big Bang is a theory that the the universe was formed from a singularity. If you take if you take a large mass like a TV or everything in your room or the house or a city and you condense it down into the point of your finger, that's called a singularity. Big term to prevent people from questioning what's going on. The singularity, the point of your finger, um, exploded out, and that's what formed the asteroids, the Earth, quasars, all of these items we find in the solar system and universe. Great theory, right? However, how did this large space condense down into what they call a singularity? No one's ever questioned this. Um, Case in point, um, all of our theories on how the Earth formed. The Earth was possibly hit by something and it formed the moon. The asteroid belt was an explosion. There was fire, and that's how gravity is formed. For most people, this theory is not a theory. It just basically is a bunch of words somebody put together and try to prove a point. Now, in writing my book, my friend Carl, we had a large argument and over 3 or 4 emails. We're still friends. We we realized that the thing missing with my book is the critique of how you get to a point where there's a singularity. How do you get something and you stuff it in a sock and you stuff it and you stuff it and the sock doesn't get any bigger? Wouldn't it be nice for Christmas if you continue to pull Christmas presents out and they never stopped because of a singularity? A singularity is one point that contains lots of points. And we're talking large things like a full city in a pinpoint. And somehow this explodes. Bam! It explodes out. And this is what formed the universe. Well, I'm not buying that. So, got into a little bit of a discussion with my friend. And as a result, I did a little digging and found that the the whole thing with the universe and and comes down to a Belgian priest who formed the Big Bang Theory. Which scientist was it? Stephen Hawking. He's done all these equations. Yeah, I got this equation. Um, and he's supposedly some genius. However, it didn't start. The theory did not start. It started with a guy. from Belgium named George Leimaitre, Lemaitre, first suggested the Big Bang Theory and theorized that the universe began from a single primordial atom. Huh. Big words. They're used to try to scare you away. This theory was founded in 1920. Um, it's never been proven. And each time somebody has tried to prove it, I'm reading some of the items on my search. They theorize and they question and there's George Leimaitre is father of the Big Bang. He has no background. He's not a scientist. He has no supporting documents. He just has a thesis he wrote, and we're supposed to believe that. So I've come along and written a book about what's really going on. And when I was young, about 15 years ago, I wrote a book while at the park over a course of a week. And I just started writing. You ever get that to where you just start writing? And I wrote and I wrote and I wrote and I wrote and I wrote. And I looked over my thesis and I was like, wow, that doesn't make sense. And so I had to think about it. I thought of it over 5 years. And after 5 years, it dawned on me. I've been thinking backwards. And if I'm thinking backwards, I think there's quite a few more minds that are thinking backwards as well. How do we get to a singularity? Just to assume a singularity doesn't prove how our universe started. And I wrote a paper called Big Bang, Big Lie, A Motion, Where We Came From, which ties together scientific theory, religion, and a lot of our beliefs that come true. And in forming this book, I wrote it 15 years ago. I did a poor man's copyright on the book. What I did was I wrote the book, I put it in an envelope, and I mailed it to myself. So I have it in a book, in an envelope, not open, something I mailed to myself 15 years ago. And I pulled out all my books and I realized that my theory has just as much substance as some of these other theories. And the issue is that they've done so much science. Science has been wonderful for science things. This is not an earth science. Now, let me explain the difference. An earth science is where you can do experiments and you can use scientific theory to prove things. For example, if you put salt with water, it dissolves. And you can continue over and over doing this. They're applying this earth science and math to try to explain something that's not an earth science. For example, when they're going over, when they think of things, they say, well, this formed, or this is going to explode 20 million years from now. 20 million years from now, if I use that example when I was taking math tests, what is the formation of E squared minus blah, blah, blah. And I said, well, I think it's going to be about 1 in about 30 million years. I would fail the test. But we don't hold scientists to the same standard. And they just get more and more complex. Stephen Hawking was heralded. He balanced an equation, tells you how the earth formed. In whose mind? In whose world? It doesn't work that way. There are other dynamics that happen when you're thinking about the universe. Now, for example, 20 years, what's a year? If you're not on this earth, what is 1 year? What is 20 years? What is 20 billion years? There is no answer for that, because a year is based on the earth rotating around the sun, and basically day and night. There's no day and night when you're in space. Did these guys forget about this stuff? We're supposed to just forget about this and just move on into other realms of reality. Well, that's not what happened. In my book, I give a basic synopsis of these items I'm talking about to get you loose, to get you thinking the right way. And then I've written part two, which gets into the nuts and bolts of uh, the Big Bang and the Big Lie. For example, I've written 3 pages of levels of how the Earth and how the universe started. I'm not using anything that is outlandish. And I write in a way that you get to put your thoughts into this. Why should we have a guy from Belgium? He might be the smartest guy in the world. He probably makes great Belgian waffles. Hold a syrup, please. But he does. What gives him the right as a church, as a Catholic priest, to teach science? I don't know. And everybody calls him the father of the Big Bang Theory. Well, there isn't much to pull this together if you start to look into it. And that's what I did. I started to look into the ins and outs of the Big Bang Theory. It doesn't hold water. There's a better example. And the example that I've chosen is becoming reality. For example, I'll give you one example. For example, there's something called quarks. Now everybody knows you have an atom, you have helium, you have hydrogen, and the atoms go around the helium, and that's what is subatomic particles. Well, if you get even smaller with the micron microscope, there are 3 quarks, QUIRKS, and scientists know about this. They're not telling anybody. Have you heard of quarks? Most of you have not. And so I have to, when talking about quarks and other things, items that are relevant to my theory, I have to explain things from scratch. Quarks, funny, about 10 years ago, a scientist was looking at quarks. These are subatomic particles, and they're the little pieces that make up the subatomic particles. And what happens is that a scientist was looking at these quarks under the microscope, and he saw these quarks go to the right. And he told the scientist, hey, look at these things. They go to the right. So another scientist looked at them, and they went to the right and they went to the left. Well, why did they go to the left? He goes, look, they're going to the left. The guy looks at it. They're going to the right. These quirks are subject to what our thoughts are. Subject to what our thoughts are. And when somebody thinks the quirks are going right, they go right. When somebody thinks they're going left, they go left. Somebody thinks they go left and right, they go left and right. These things, they have no idea, and it baffles the scientists. Have you heard of these theories? No. They don't publicize this. What about all of the items that they found from the Hubble telescope? They're finding that there are large planets. I'm diverting to another subject to prove my point of you're in the dark. And if you look at some of these items from the Hubble telescope, they disprove everything. Everything we know and everything we thought. We thought, for example, that the reason planets revolve around the sun. I was a young boy when this happened. It's because planets have magnetic cores or active cores. That's in the middle. That's a molten lava, molten core. Well, they sent the space probes out, and they found that's not true, and that some of Jupiter's moons had a molten active core. Have we heard the scientists refute this in a statement? Hey, we made a mistake that planets are not, they don't all have molten cores, and some moons have them. In fact, when the probe was going past Jupiter, funny, the camera went out for 12 hours. They said it was rewinding. What the hell would